And you're now live.
All right. This is Senate Appropriations and Friday, March 12th. And our first item on our agenda is to take up S-114, which is a literacy bill. And we have with us to present the bill, it's Senator Campion and Jim Demaray from Legislative Council. We want you to just go through the kind of the high points. The other thing, which we did look at because your committee had sent us a letter about literacy and funding. And so we were trying to make sure that we were crosswalking what we were proposing to include in our fast track bill with what's in this bill. So if you want to just give us why we have this bill, Brian, I think that there's two things. There's a work group.
Sure.
And maybe a position.
Mm-hmm. Sure, thanks for that. And I think you're going to be seeing two other members of Senate Ed today. Senator Chinden will be in to talk about the miscellaneous ed bill, and Senator Hooker will be in later to talk about the school discipline bill. And I'll leave the details to Mr. Demaray, but the big picture on this, as I've mentioned when I came into this committee before, is we have a literacy issue in this state with 50% of our third graders arriving in third grade not being able to read at grade level, or finishing third grade not being able to read at grade level. And that's a big problem. It's a big concern. So what we've done, as you'll see, is we did increase, with the endorsement of the Agency of Education, they recognize that this is an issue. We did increase the staffing. We added a staffing person. We also asked in the letter to appropes, as well as in this bill, an appropriation that would distribute funds to school districts that are most in need of literacy improvement. We asked that teaching assessment programs be evaluated in the state. We did, as I believe I've mentioned in this committee also, hear from teachers that did not feel equipped upon graduation from their elementary school education programs and colleges to teach literacy. So we want to assess those programs and have the agency come back with a report. And we also do create a working group. We think this issue rises to such a priority and such a need that we think a working group working hand in hand with this new position at the agency is very important as we collect data, as we move forward, as we really try to make the strides that I think we need to make in this state to get literacy rates up. I don't need to tell everybody here because it affects all different kinds of life decisions when you cannot read and write at grade level. It adds to suspensions, expulsions sometimes. It adds to, students that end up in other issues growing up. So I think it's an important issue. I really appreciate any consideration you'll give to the dollars that we've asked for. And in some ways, honestly, I was thinking about this, I'm going back to committee now to continue our work on school meals. I really feel like this is a session where we're focused a lot on children in Vermont. And not only because of COVID, but also because of other needs that we have recognized out there. So thank you, and happy to take any questions or leave it with Mr. Demaray.
Okay, Senator Ruth.
Brian, this isn't on the literacy piece, but I know you're going to be leaving, and I want to ask before you leave. I had an email from Holly Morehouse on after school.
Okay.
With language, including an appropriation. She said she presented it in ed, but I'm just wondering, is it a recommendation from your committee as well?
Yeah. Thanks for asking.
Actually, we put tentatively $4 million in our bill.
Yeah, and
that's right.
So
do we need, but I guess the question maybe you're asking, Philip, is do we need any language to go with it?
Yeah, she's got a pretty fleshed out proposal for where the money goes. But I was just wondering if you guys had okayed that language.
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. And Senator Kitchell did ask us for some language. Once we realized that money is indeed in the expedited budget, we will now go back We've been working with Holly pretty closely. She's basically revised some of the language that we initially proposed, and we'll continue to work on that language on Tuesday and send it to this committee so that you can include it in the expedited budget.
Okay, so I should put aside her email and we should.
Yeah, I
take
think
what-
that's, we're on it if that helps.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Your time frame, you're going to have to move rather quickly because our goal was to vote this thing out maybe Tuesday.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sunday,
But just to
Brian,
let you
Lord,
know,
Sunday.
at this point, within the expedited or the fast track bill, we have the money that you requested for literacy training of teachers. We have the after school. Then we have summer meals. You proposed $500,000, but based on last year's experience, it took a lot more money than that.
Okay.
So we were going to use what we thought was necessary based on last year's experience, which I'm sure you won't be surprised, but was significantly higher than
Yeah.
what you were proposing. And then we'll do the higher ed separately. So getting back, what we have here, in addition to what we're going to put into the fast track for the literacy training to give our teachers enhanced skills in the instruction of reading, is a study committee. And it seems like there was language, and you're saying that they just, it's an uncompensated group.
That's correct. These are members of that are within there. I'm not sure the language that Mr. Demeray will tell you is in there, but this is our usual suspects in terms of partnering with the agency on things.
And I thought I read that there was a section about they would get their expenses reimbursed, but that got that language got struck.
Tim, do you want to weigh in? I think that language is still in there.
It's still there. So the advisory council is a permanent council. It's not a working group. It's designed to be there ongoing
Okay.
to advise the agency and state board and general assembly on literacy. And there are members who are not otherwise compensated. There are 6 members who would be receiving per diem and reimbursement. And the appropriation for that is $10,000 per year. So $10,000 in fiscal 22. Then the Agency of Education will include going forward in its annual budget request that same amount.
Okay. All right. So we're creating an ongoing committee. I need to ask joint fiscal. Is it customary that we instruct an agency to put a particular expenditure in a budget in the future? Because we can't obligate future.
We don't usually do that. You would fund it for the first year if you wanted to fund it here or in the big bill. And then you would expect the agency to, include that especially if it's a statutory ongoing obligation. But you wouldn't normally put in that directive language that's in section 8 of the bill right now, really.
Okay. I didn't think that was our standard practice. The other we would have to create a position. And so that's something that we would have to do. Even if we move this bill forward, we would have to take the authorization of the position and do it through the big bill, because that's going to be a base expenditure. And that's a position that has to get funded out of the general fund, because education administration
Sure.
falls to the general fund. So this is why we have it. We had in our bill, we have the literacy training, the 3 million. So we've taken care of that, which is really important.
Thank you.
We can create the work group, but the position, we can fund this modest amount because it's such a small amount for the, well, not, I don't know what it's, not the work group, whatever you call this ongoing study group, advisory group.
Advisor,
But the position would have to, we would have to have an amendment that takes that out, and we would have to put it in consideration as we develop our FY22 budget.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay. So other questions about what this bill does?
So you would be amending the bill by taking out section 3, which we're putting into the fast track bill, the $3 million with the language from this bill.
Right.
And then taking out the position and the funding for the position and the section 8 piece.
Right.
It sounds like.
Right. The section 8 is sort of instructive about future budgets, and the other is just the position, which we'll put on our list for requests as we're trying to build the FY22 ongoing budget. Okay. So Jim, you'll do that amendment then with those 3 changes?
Sure. So you want to take out the entirety of section 3, which is the grant program, right?
Yeah, because we're going to move it forward fast in our H350.
Yeah, okay. And then we're taking out, we're taking out the section about baking in the AOE request and the new position at the agency.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Brian while we have him? Otherwise, I think your committee is going to be, because we have Senator Chittenden waiting on S-115.
Yeah. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
So do we want to wait until we get the, we can wait and move the bill out once we get the amendment?
Great.
Okay.
Up to you.
Thank you all.
Well, all right, why don't we, because we don't have to move it out today, we've taken the testimony, we can get the amendment written, and then we have Tuesday, we can vote it out officially once, because it does involve 3 different pieces. I would feel more comfortable not voting until we actually have the amendment ready to move forward and take up today.
Great.
So, okay. All right. So Jim, you'll have that available for us so that we can take action on the bill on Tuesday.
Well, yep.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, Senator Chittenden, you're here on S-115.
I am. I'll be relatively brief. It's really an honor to be here before the Senate Appropriations Committee. Senator Kitchell, I would just go through a quick rundown. This is doing 4 things, and it's really an amalgamation of 3 different bills, mostly from the work of Senator Lyons, Senator Ram, as well as Senator Hardy. 2 of them have financial implications. I have a fiscal note. I don't know if you've all seen that. But on the high levels, the libraries piece, the first piece, which I understand was passed last year by the Senate in full, but the pandemic paused it. That has a $4,000 implication, but it's really to understand the landscape of libraries in the state, how they can be strengthen each other's, and also their important role in our community. So I guess it's long overdue work. There's also some cleanup language in our statutes about libraries.
Yes, we took testimony last year from the library because it seemed like quite a lot of work. But he indicated to us that he felt prepared to take it on, and we passed it out last year. So you're just bringing it forward again. Okay. All right. That's number 1. That's 4,000.
Yes. The second one.
Just such big spenders there.
The second one does have part in the fiscal note. It does speak to, it has to do with cultural liaisons. It doesn't have a cost to the state. If anything, this is enabling language to allow for municipalities and school districts to jointly fund a position that serves both municipal and educational needs. Similar to how we have other programs, the current statute is ambiguous on 2 terms. I yield to Jim on that piece. But with this, we have cultural liaisons in Winooski and other communities. We took testimony where they have to draw a paycheck from the city of Winooski and then a separate paycheck from the school district. but they're really serving the same community. And so this just allows, while still keeping the funds separate in accordance with the statutes, the allowing collaboration and joint funding of one position.
Questions on that? So that's enabling legislation, okay? And no cost, it just recognizes there could be multiple funding sources. And all right, if I just checking the screen, think we're all set on that one.
Third one states has no fiscal impact, as to do with the wellness program, really to just broaden what wellness means in our schools beyond just fitness and nutrition. I think we can all agree that mental health is increasingly of a concern, and thinking about the whole mind, body, and spirit. This is, again, more enabling legislation to motivate the agency of education to think differently, or to start a curriculum and council to think about wellness in a more holistic perspective.
The agency support this?
Yes.
Okay.
I will double check that, Jim, if you know that otherwise, but I'm 99% sure the agency supports this.
They did, yeah.
Okay.
The last one does have.
Just about, Senator Nick has a question.
After Senator Chittenden is done with this one, can I just go back to 3? The one-
Sure. Or
Culturally,
why don't we do it now, since we're, go back to 3?
so I'm wondering, enabling language, but is it somehow required of towns and schools to do this, or is it an option?
Just an option. So
Okay, thank you.
that, Jim, please correct me if I'm incorrect in any of this.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so now we're,
Fourth one.
Fourth item has, sorry.
the fourth, we're down to number 4, and that does have a spending implication, but it's more within the education fund as it relates to a cost of operating a school. And I think that those are the actually a companion to the bill we passed on, although it's not the right terminology, feminine hygiene supplies.
So it effectively just mandates that public schools, as well as approved independent schools, provide free menstrual products in restrooms. And the cost in the fiscal note I have would be roughly, based on estimates of other states that have done similar things, $50,000 to $60,000 annually beginning in 2022.
So across all the schools, it's
And
a fairly modest cost.
We
Senator
last year,
Bruce, you look like you just snapped to attention there.
oh, I was just going to say, we passed a number of these pieces last year, and then they sat in the House along with every other bill that we put out last year. So, so Appropriations already voted for, I think, everything here except for the cultural liaison language and maybe one other piece, but the money pieces.
Mhm. So that makes it easy unless we want to change our mind. It's sort of like the bill we just went through, which was extending all the deadlines on everything we did last year. I could have shortened it a bit by saying, if you liked it last year, all we're doing is changing the date. But any other questions of Senator Chittenden while we have him here? No? Okay. I don't know how come you're getting off so easy.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask that question.
It's
We
that
usually
genial
at
air he
midday-
gives off.
I did have one question on that advisory council for literacy. Is the librarian on that on the other bill?
I'd have to double check. Jim, I don't know if you know the answer to that.
I think the answer is no. I can pull it up quickly though and check.
I can bring that up in education this afternoon. The state librarian?
Yeah, it just seems like the libraries play such an important role in literacy and reading programs. It was a thought I had, and I'm sorry I didn't, I thought of it earlier and it just slipped my mind till now, but it's not that I'm making it, but it just seemed like in light of the role that libraries play, whether that was an office that would have a perspective to bring. Okay, so
The answer is no.
mhm.
Yep.
We raise it with the committee this afternoon, Senator Kitchell. Would that work for you?
Sure, that's fine. And if it's no, that doesn't lend itself that role, I perfectly understand. It was just something that came to mind, particularly since the whole library legislation that we passed last year has now been imported into the bill. And I know that we've got a state librarian who's so energetic and really a visionary in terms of what that system can do. And so appreciate your just taking that back and raising it. So we have S-115. Unless there's further discussion, I'll take a motion. Oh, Senator Baruth, you have a question?
I was going to move
Okay,
the bill favorably.
all right.
I'll second it.
All right, so we have a motion made by Senator Baruch, seconded by Senator Westman to move S-115 favorably. Unless it's further discussion, I'm going to have the clerk call the roll.
1 second, Madam Chair. I was sent the
Mhm.
the documents.
Why don't you search for Chrissy Gilhooly?
Okay, here we go. Senator Ballant,
Yes.
Senator Baruth, yes. Senator Nitka,
Yes,
Senator Sears,
Yes.
Senator Starr,
Yes,
Senator Westman,
Yes.
Senator Kitchell,
Yes,
unanimous.
and education is Senator Baruch.
Yes, I'm happy to report.
Are you our committee member assigned to education?
Oh, no, that's Senator Ballant, I believe,
Senator Ballant?
for K through 12.
yes,
Okay.
agency of ed, yep.
Okay, let me look.
But she has a lot going on, so if she would prefer
right.
to
Well, I'll
delegate,
leave it up
I
to
would
you.
do.
Senator Ballant, that's your section of the budget. Do you want to report the bill or do you want to defer, delegate to our other member?
I think I would like to delegate. Thank you, Madam
Okay.
Chair.
Okay. So Senator Baruth, you're on.
Sounds good.
You're the reporter. All right, thank you very much. Senator Chittenden.
Thank you.
And Jim Demaray, thank you.
thank you both.
You're welcome.
So now we are 4 minutes ahead of time. And we are back on COVID-19 relief. And we wanted to use this time to discuss something that we've been talking about within the smaller group of money chairs, which is House and Senate, Finance, Ways and Means, and Approps. And that is the amount of federal money that's going out to municipalities as well as to schools. And the thought that just like we've done with some other areas where there's been funding, how we can provide some consultation, some technical assistance, how we can visualize the ways in which that money could be used to address some very, very significant but long-term investments. And so Steve Klein, I don't know if he's on yet, but we asked Joint Fiscal to give us some proposed language that would, with this fast track bill, because this money is all going out directly. It's going directly to schools. It's going directly to municipalities. And some discussion with the regional planning entities that did quite a bit of work with the earlier federal funds that went out, as well as how we could provide help in this way, sort of like we did with Efficiency Vermont, doing all that technical work for schools relative to air quality and the rules and so forth. And so what I'm asking the committee to consider is in the fast track bill, appropriating money and identifying specifically the resources that would be available to help. We've been in touch with the League of Cities and Towns, the RPCs, and we don't need to decide today, but I wanted to give you some preliminary language and then we can talk about it. But the whole thinking is with I think it's like 300 million going out to towns, some of them are really small, and they're getting 300,000 or whatever. I think it's always beneficial to be able to say, we would like to do this, or what are visualizing some of the possibilities. I had a small village say, gee, we would like to be able to install a solar installation, which would help us with our energy costs for municipal buildings. Now, on the surface, I don't, is that possible to do? It seems like that's something that would give long-term benefit. It would have savings. It would be environmentally sound. So that's just an example of, I think, some of the areas where we could really assist both our educational system and our municipalities. Senator Starr.
Yeah, I'm wondering, and I've thought quite a bit about this. You know how Vermont gets a small states grant through the federal money, and that's why we get what we get. Why can we have a small towns grant? And so even at the smallest level, they get a certain amount.
They all do. They all do under the federal bill.
So it's set up with a small towns grant?
Yeah, they all, I don't know what the methodology is. Maybe Steve Klein can tell us, or Stephanie. But we know, like St. Johnsbury, I think, was like $1.5 million that would flow. And so I think
it's population-based grant.
It's probably I was going to say, I bet it's based on population. So I don't know, the little town of Calais was getting what, a couple 100,000. So
are we going to get that list?
There is a list. It's up on our website. It's all the individual towns, the counties, and then the metro area, which is only one in Vermont. There's a spreadsheet that accompanies the federal bill. What this proposal is to actually fund both the county through the RPCs and the League of Cities and Towns, technical assistance to the counties, and have the county money, which we can direct. The local money goes directly to the towns, but it comes with the same restrictions that the state money comes with. So, whether or not that solar array would be an allowed use of these dollars is a question that towns would need to have help wrestling with in terms of understanding what's an allowed use.
So the money was flowing directly to the towns. We don't appropriate it. Yes.
Sorry, I just have a question about that. So we're overseen by the federal government in terms of our spending under these relief packages. Are we then supposed to be watchdogging the towns and how they spend? Are we on the hook for how they spend?
I don't think so.
I don't think so either. We can
So
double check that, but
it's the federal government. So if somebody spent the money on something that was completely outside the bounds, the federal government would have to go at them.
It would be an audit finding with them. I don't remember with the ERA funding. I don't think that there was a town that didn't get a new fire truck. But that money went down that way. So this is the challenge here, is the way in which the money flows. For the money that comes through the state, we have to appropriate it. But this is not coming through state government. It's going directly to local schools, or it's going directly to municipalities. So this is a way of trying to assist the schools or the towns, or in the case of counties, of which we've got the sheriffs, but we've also got the waste, sometimes a waste district. There's some other entities out there. Yeah. So what we'd like to do, and maybe if Steve's here, we could give the language, but it was a way of saying, let's try to make sure that when people are thinking about money and how it's being spent, they understand the conditions like you're talking about, Philip, but also what would be permissible use, or to help them visualize what would be a good way of taking this money, a once in a lifetime slug of money that's coming their way. Bobby, you're probably looking up how much Troy gets.
Well, I'd like to find it. Maybe Stephanie could send us a link on our.
We
on our
would,
iPad.
I'll have Chrissy send out a link to everyone for the spreadsheet for the town information. You have to go sort of column by column. But we don't have language drafted for the bill, but what we do have is from the RPCs and from the league, a 2-pager from each with the sort of bullet points of the idea of the technical assistance. If Chrissy could send those out to the members of the committee, or we could put them up on screen one after another.
Okay.
And then we also have a piece that Steve drafted regarding on the school side, the sort of component parts of what we would envision in a technical assistance.
Okay. Oh, I thought he had both. But we can look at what we have from the RPCs and also from the league, because towns have sometimes different relationships. Either they work very closely with the league, or their relationship with the RPCs might vary. And in the Northeast Kingdom, we actually have a combined RDC RPC, which is very well connected with every town, even little towns, and it's viewed as a really good resource, but not every town has that same relationship. So if we have the documents, those 2-pagers, this is just for the first kind of run through in terms of how we could, as even though we don't control the money, how we could provide some guidance and the greatest assurance that that we have the money spent in a permissible way, and in a way that we think is the long term. If we're really saying, how do we take this money and use it in a way that we're leaving the state better than when we got the money? So do you want to put that up?
Chrissy, can you put up the RPC piece first? That looks like the league piece.
Well, we'll go with the league since.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, so they're saying they're uniquely positioned to provide technical assistance to cities and towns, but municipals such as fire districts.
Now, did they want an appropriation to help with this?
Yeah,
Yes.
we would actually take some of our federal money and
And fund it?
fund it this way.
Okay.
We have $1 billion to work with.
But they shouldn't
And
they should do an administrative fee from the federal fund, get 10% or something.
10%?
Well,
Well, hey,
the local dollars go to the town. You would actually have to, the local dollars don't flow through us. They go to the towns. And so unless you wanted to set up a structure where you're having them build the towns, it seems more efficient to do it as a state contract.
Wouldn't that be like 130 million, Bob?
No, just they're getting 300 million, so it'd be 30. That would go to the League of Towns, for administering it.
They aren't administering it. They're providing consultation. The towns will have to do all the fiscal work. They'll have to make the decisions. What they're providing is sort of what Guidehouse is doing for the state.
How much
And
are
that
they
is-
charging?
Well, it's not 10%, I can tell you. It's a fixed fee. So this is the first cut, and this is what the league is saying that they could do.
If you scroll down to the next page, the idea would be, it would be over 2 years. These dollars stretch through December 2024.
300,000, 600,000 total.
So
Across 2 years, plus the $50,000 for the one-time software piece.
is the league, providing the accounting functions? Because I'm sure that somebody will have to verify everything.
Well, it says
So-
here,
It says auditing.
software to tracking, cybersecurity, finance and budgeting assistance, maintenance and monitoring. So,
Yep, that would be,
but then it raises the question about what will be the relationship between what the league is doing and what the RPCs would be doing.
right.
And so do you want to switch over to the RPC?
Yeah,
The
because I think
RPC
we
is mostly
should,
focused on the county level. but-
okay.
But because the county money, because of the nature of the counties in Vermont, the dollars can also flow to the towns here. So
Also, is there a list someplace of what is eligible?
well, that's in that we do have that list. It's the same list. It's the same restrictions that are on the state monies. They apply to both the state and the local
Okay,
relief dollars here.
But there's still a lot of grayness, let me
Yes.
say.
yeah,
I mean, there are certain things that are very definitive. You can't use it for pensions.
Yeah.
But other areas, I think, just like with the CRF, it's going to be somewhat evolving in
And
terms of.
they can use it for replacing lost revenue. That is one of the uses they can use it for, in addition to the, help to individuals, help to small businesses, expenditures that are in response to the COVID-19.
So for example, if they had businesses that really couldn't pay their property taxes, like restaurants, they could be able to use the money for that. The question I have is, then would they still view, if they got federal money to replace the taxes that the businesses couldn't pay, would they still be able to turn around and consider that a delinquent tax and collect it, out into the future?
I don't know the answer to that.
But that was one thing I was thinking about is, if they wanted to help local businesses by, they could, you understand, they could get made whole and still hold the businesses accountable for paying taxes. But I don't know the answer to that. I only have questions. Senator Starr.
Yeah, wouldn't towns use this money though for long-term things that they saw that they could see coming, but they haven't had the money, like water improvements, sewer improvements, road improvements?
That's the whole desire, to think about those very kind of expenditures, and that is really what the potential for this. Or
Because that would save them money for 5, 10, maybe 15 years down the road, if they spend it right. But if they go buying fire trucks and dump trucks and bucket loaders, and that stuff wears out in 5, 8 years and it's gone.
Well, I think they will ultimately make their own decisions because we don't control the money. But I think that kind of very thinking about what are the options, where can you do long-term investments, et cetera, are really where we're hoping that getting some consultation available could help get us to make the right investments.
I can see a lot of communities wanting to invest in broadband on top of what the other money that we're spending.
Mm-hmm. Well, everybody's going to have, obviously, depending on their needs, or they're going to say, look, broadband's getting funded in other ways. And so, once we know what that is, that might influence decisions as well. Right now, what we're trying to say is, how do we, as a legislature, give the resources and the help to have the schools and our towns and ultimately in the counties entities get the best long-term benefit from this very substantial amount of money.
I would like our crew in St. Johnsbury to look after our money. If, Northeastern Development, I think they would do a lot better job than somebody out of Montpelier. And they work with all of our communities anyway. So if we have a choice,
I don't know. Let's see what the RPCs are talking about.
yeah.
My main concern is that we're clear who is doing what, or for whom, so to speak, so that we're not creating kind of a confusion, or, oh, I'm paid to do that, or, I don't want to work with you, that kind of thing. So maybe we can look at what the RPCs have submitted next, Stephanie.
So Chrissy, can you put up the RPC?
You bet. Can you see that?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, so the proposal is they will act as counties for this funding. So here they are, RPCs are getting it based on a percentage.
What is that, Jane?
Says that they will be paid 15, between 15 and 5 and 15, depending on the needs.
See, my 10% wasn't off that much.
No, you probably read this in advance.
Oh, yeah, twice.
Yeah.
No, I'd never seen this. But I know what everybody's charging, and so they're going to charge a lot more than the league.
Well, the RPCs are going to charge the towns by project. So they don't, that's what they would get in total. It doesn't necessarily mean that's what we're going to pay them, as I understand.
Has the league and the RPC sat down and talked about what they're doing?
I don't know. This is something Steve Klein has been working on. So I don't know how they've been, where they've been synchronized. It could very well be that the leagues is obviously not with the same level of detail, or but when you're managing the complexity of maybe one of these projects. So it looks like the RPCs would say, if a municipality wants to do that, I don't know, water, sewer, whatever, or project, they would help them, but they would do it on a percentage basis, and the town would pay them out of their allocation.
So it wouldn't cost us anything.
No, I think the one area, but we need to be clear on that. But the other would be where they're functioning in lieu of a county.
Can I ask a basic question, and you may have already answered it, but if the money is designed to flow to the municipalities, are we even allowed to, in effect, subtract 10% from what they're due?
We are
by creating, no, if we went
No.
along with this,
No, the way I was interpreting it, Philip, is if St. Johnsbury got $1.5 million and they wanted to do a particular project and they wanted the RPC to help them, they would go and the RPC would charge a percentage to the town.
I understand what you said. What they're saying here, Vermont's regional planning commissions will act as counties for this funding. So it's almost as though they imagine the money flowing through them.
Well, no, they would do the accounting and all that, right? And set the project up.
If they say they'll act as counties for the funding and administer the funds on behalf of the state, I'm not sure that doesn't mean that they see themselves as holding the funds.
I was reading it the other way, and that is because we really don't have much of county government, they
Yeah.
would function as that entity.
No,
But
I get that. That makes sense to me. If they wanted to set themselves up in effect as a resource for municipalities and have the state help fund them as a resource, that, it seems to me, is pretty uncontroversial. But this first sentence of the proposal sounds broader than that to me.
well, we would need to be very clear on that, because you're absolutely right, that
They're not acting as counties, they're acting as contractors or.
well,
Right.
I think they were talking about the money that flows to counties.
Yeah, the 80 million. It looks like.
Yeah, there's just some weird slippage in there.
So,
See, the counties were gonna get so much, but the towns would get so much, and what they're after it to manage almost sounds like that 80 million that was going to the counties.
How much goes to counties, Stephanie?
I'm gonna switch over to the sheet.
See, up above, they say with the county share being required to go to municipalities, many municipalities may be overwhelmed and unprepared. So then they're saying we'll act as counties and we will administer the funds on behalf of the state, identify, design, and build projects consistent. So to me, that sounds like they're setting themselves up as a middle person, or they imagine setting themselves up as a middle person for the stream of funding that's going to the municipalities.
Regardless of whether they're involved or not.
Right,
Mhm. Like they're the clearinghouse for everything.
right, and that.
But
and
I
that-
don't
yeah.
think, I don't think they can do that in light of the money going directly to the towns.
Well, that was my original point is if the towns don't agree to this arrangement, which I can't see why they would.
I don't know, we need clarification on exactly what's being said here.
In that top line, we do need clarification, but the money, there's money that's going directly to the municipalities. And then there is money that is allocated for counties, and to the county money then needs to be distributed in part to the municipalities within that county. And so we will get we'll get clarity on the county piece, which is allowed to have some state direction on it, as I understand it, as opposed to the piece that's going directly to the municipalities.
so
So
No,
is Steve Klein on?
He's coming on right now. He'll be right with you.
All right, because we're really struggling here. Senator, and because we need some clarity, but so we're asking a lot of questions and then hypothesizing what the response is. So it would be better that we outline what we have for questions and need for clarification. So Steve can get, either he knows it or he can get it for us. So Senator Westman.
well, do we really want in this, because the record keeping piece of this in the accounting will be a big part of the back end of all of this. Do we really want both the league and the RPCs setting up record keeping separately? And
Well, that's a
if they're
question.
if
I
they're
think
having
the
to-
fundamental question here is, how do we avoid duplication of functions between the
that's
two
a-
entities?
That's exactly my question. I don't want to pay twice for two different IT systems that will do the same thing.
I don't know how what position we're in to pay IT systems for both. And I don't know, Steve, I guess this is a question. And that is, how do we calibrate what the league would be doing versus the RPCs? And the way in which the proposal from the RPCs came in creates a lot of confusion that somehow they are going to have control over the money that goes to municipalities as opposed to counties. So we're getting into that need for clarification. X amount of money to go to counties, however we define them, although we have a very small county presence here. And then the certain amount goes to the towns. And then the way I was interpreting is the RPCs were saying, once the town gets the money, they would say, we would like to do this kind of project, and they would be they would be there to help them with the project, and they would collect from the town a percentage of that project as reimbursement. But Philip was concerned that it looked like they were just wanting to scoop an overall percentage of the money regardless. And so we really are not clear on what they're proposing to do and how we sync up the work of these two entities.
Can I jump in on that a little bit?
That's what we're asking you, Steve.
Yeah. So there, first of all, right now there's about, and it's 57 million will go to municipalities and 120 will go to the counties. I was just talking with Walter's office. We think the 120 will have to be redistributed to municipalities. So basically the whole 170 million, and I'm leaving Burlington out. They're 19 million they get directly, but so this roughly $180 million will go out to municipalities primarily, and maybe some small deviations. So I think you're right. I mean, you don't need to record keeping, but the thought was that the VLCT and the regional planning entities may work with, they may have different clientele, different people working in different areas. So you don't really want to do record keeping, but the concept here was, when we looked at the money, was to sort of figure out if you took a percentage, and I think we, roughly used 170 million, we used about 1%, and said 1% would go toward helping them with administration. It would be more about helping. Nobody can manage it. The towns get the money, they can do whatever they want, but it'll be providing with assistance. The money that we already put out, we had a different construct, because there, the tax department could actually pay the RPCs for their time and effort, whereas there's no ability to do that here. There's no other money than billing the local governments for assistance. So it needs the work that the RPC letters is exactly right. It's a concept, and I think you're right, it needs a little work on how they design that program.
Well, because I think it does make a difference in terms of what they feel that they would control. If a town wants to go like to our NVDA and say, we need help with this project, then out of the town's allocation, I was thinking they would pay the RPC for their services with that project to do all the technical work, all the stuff. But that would be negotiated between the municipality and the RPC.
Right. That would involve and so maybe one argument would be you put a lesser amount to the RPCs to give them some starting money, but you're right. In the long run, they should get it from the people they help. But it's with the League of Cities and Towns, the concept was just to give them a capacity. And maybe you do that a little bit. I mean, that's your choice, whatever you want to do on this.
Well, we're just seeing it for the first time, and we're having a hard time understanding the proposals as we read them in terms of what does this really mean between the two.
Yeah, I think we just wanted to get those two entities up and going and providing technical assistance. And you're right, give them both maybe authority to bill for services, but also to give them a core funding that they could start working and have stuff ready for the counties before the municipalities even ask and say, here are some model programs you could do. Here's some areas where you could use the money. Here's where you could get in trouble. I mean, there is some work that would not be billable, essentially core technical assistance.
Okay. So Philip, do you want to raise your question, or have I stated, I haven't stated it well enough?
No, I think that is exactly right. And I heard Steve saying that they would go back and refine their proposals. The League of Cities and Towns seems more intuitive to me, because they already have these municipalities as members.
Right.
And, there's a relationship established. The RPC thing as a contracting unit makes sense to me, but it's hard to imagine any other role for them. Or I guess maybe, in that we have enough money, setting them up with some software system to handle those potential customers makes sense. And I definitely think the League of Cities and Towns setup before the money comes in makes sense. So,
all right, Bobby, you have a comment?
A question, I think, Steve, how's that money gonna get divided up amongst all the towns? Is it per capita?
Yeah, it's basically by population, and we actually have I can send you the formula for the 57 million. It's every town gets a chunk, but the county money, since we don't have any counties really of functionality, that money will have to go out pretty much. It's a little less clear that that's formula driven like population. That'll be something, there may be a little bit of discretion there as to how we give it out. But I think it is basically by population formula.
You can't get a waiver where you can lump that right in with the town money?
You know, you're above my level of knowledge.
You know,
right now.
we didn't even do that with the local government bill that we passed out. We differentiated between towns by population. That's how we did it, X amount per capita. And then we set aside money that went to the sheriffs and the waste districts. If you remember, we recognized those county entities when we did our CRF bill for local government assistance.
But hell, the counties are getting twice as much as the towns, and we don't even have a county government system really, other than the
Well,
sheriff.
that's,
court.
you see, I think that's what they're trying to work out because Vermont does not have that county government. So the way in which this bill from a federal level creates some real questions or challenges for us that don't exist in other states. So Steve, you said Welch's office, they're trying to work this out, this county.
Well, they're talking about it. Their impression is we have very little discretion, that we're just going to give the money to municipalities. There is some language we need to understand about, HUD's definition of.
Well, if they give it all to
government.
municipalities, then we haven't got the issue with counties.
Yeah.
Correct. The county issue is pretty much, either way, you're not going to give the money to counties. You're going to give the money to local governments. The question is, does it include, is there any chance you give some to CUDs? Any chance you give it to police districts or fire districts? It's not
Give it all
100%.
to the towns.
Yeah, I think it's going to go all to the towns. I think
We
that
don't
would be good.
need,
Yeah.
we don't need new cruisers and flashing lights and fire trucks.
But you see, Bobby, we won't control it.
Yeah, it'll be
Well,
all.
but if you give
that's
it- if
I
you
mean, the
give
two
it
big
to the
concerns is-
selectmen,
they're restricting what they can do with the money, and the concern is they spend it for something they can't use. Or the other concern is, like we have here, is that they build some sort of stuff that they will lead on to ongoing expenditures beyond the time this money's there. So there is a value in helping them work through that. And also, everybody who receives money is required to do the reporting. And some of these communities are pretty small, and their ability to report is going to be limited.
I don't think the issue here isn't saying that it's not valuable to provide guidance and consultation. It really gets into the funding and who's doing what and how they're getting paid. That's what we're struggling with. It isn't, at least from the comments, I think everybody is in agreement that we want to provide advice and some structure so that we take the greatest advantage. But we need to understand what the RPCs are saying that they would control, what they're projecting. I was interpreting it as though they would get it on a per project based on the cost and nature of the project. Philip interpreted it a different way. So we've got to understand, not that we don't want to help in this way, but we want to make sure that we're very clear on what it is and who is doing it, and what are the financial expectations. So, so I think what the committee's issues are getting more into the details as opposed to not agreeing that having this kind of direction and resource is a sound idea.
I just think in the setup of this, they ought to be working together for the basic functions of the things that they have to do and not duplicate.
Yeah, like the accounting or like whatever.
Yes, and because in the backside, it's very expensive, particularly for these smaller places, to keep track of everything that they're going to need to, because people are going to come back and look at those things. So those systems ought not to be duplicated.
Well, they'll
So-
have sort of a clerk of the works to keep track of all where the money's going, I would.
Well,
presume.
they had to with ERA, and they have to with all the money that flows down. I think what we're trying to do is how do we support and influence decisions, sound fiscal decisions with long-term, and make sure that they're getting the kind of explanation of what they can do or what they can't do, and understanding the administrative requirements. So I'm gonna, Steve, at this
Yep.
point, you understand
just-
what we're trying to sort
Yep,
out.
we'll try to put it in a draft and it'll hopefully come close. The VLCT is more like what you're more comfortable with that right now, though. We'll need to do some work on the RPC one.
Briefly, but if I,
Yes, go ahead, Senator Sears.
well, briefly, I want to make sure that they're on the hook if they misspend the money. During
The local
Hurricane
government charge.
Irene, during Hurricane Irene, several communities did things that were not approved later on, and they are on the hook. But
Yep.
you know, it needs to be clear, it's not going to be a state obligation to
Okay.
fill in if they do something. That's all I, in this.
Yeah, and the federal statute does say that the recipient of the money is responsible for the record keeping.
But that should be reinforced,
Okay.
whether it's the league person or the RPC person. They need to understand that, because you're right, Dick, that was
Yeah.
particularly in your area.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm looking at the
Thank you.
clock, and we have Agency of Transportation coming in on their budget. And so, thank you, Steve.
Okay.
We need to refine it. The purpose of the discussion was to just put this out as something that we talked about as a way of guiding and assisting with, and to do it quickly because the money is going out, and wanted to use the fast track bill if everybody was agreeing that this was a good way to move forward. So we'll talk about it on Tuesday once we get more information and greater clarity.
If they have a list of what towns are going to get on their website, I can't find it.
No, I couldn't either. I
Okay.
think somebody. Stephanie was
I can
saying
send you.
that-
Chrissy to send out. I sent the Vermont specific detail to Chrissy to send out to the members.
Okay.
Yeah.
It'll be sent out to you.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
So I'm going to move on because we have Secretary Flynn, who is here. And I believe, I don't know, I guess Commissioner Manoli is there.
Michelle
Says-
Boomhauer.
Well, I don't know. So I'm going to have to move my screen. I see lots of people. So what I'm going to do is we'll move on to the Agency of Transportation's 2020 budget request. And I will let Secretary Flynn introduce the members of his agency that he has here today with him as well. So Secretary Flynn, as you know, this is the Senate, and we tend to go at a higher level in terms of the budgetary detail that we want to get into, and know that it really helps for you to give us the highlights. We have obviously moved some money out already with the last federal bill and in the budget adjustment. So there's a lot going on, and we'll leave it up to you to really give us the highlights in terms of the 2022 budget.
Thank you very
So
much.
You can take it from here. And if you need screen sharing, I think Chrissy will arrange that.
Thank you very much, Senator Kitchell, and good afternoon, Senators. For the record, Joe Flynn, Secretary of the Agency of Transportation. With me from the agency today is Commissioner Manoli from the Department of Motor Vehicles, Ann Gamble, the Chief Engineer for VTrans, Michelle Boomhauer, the Director of Policy Planning, Intermodal Development, Wayne Gamble, the Director of Finance and Administration for VTrans, Terry Blaisdell, the Finance Director for DMV, and Bradley Kuchenberger and Aaron Brodeur from the Business Office at VTrans. For those of you who may not know, CFO Lenny LeBlanc retired a week and a half ago, and Bradley Kuchenberger and Aaron are supporting us here today with this testimony. I will attempt to be brief. I don't want you to think I'm trying to fly over things too quickly, so please rein me in if it seems to go too quickly. But Chrissy, I will take a stab at driving this. Whoops, maybe I won't. Maybe if you could give me permission, it would just save you having to.
There you go. I just gave you permission. You should be all set.
All right, and I am going to see if I can find it. Michelle ran through this with me this morning.
And if not, I have it ready if you need help.
All right, and I am just trying to remember how to get to the large slide screen here. View, yeah, view. It's amazing the things you have to learn. There we go. So again, this is the agency's 2022 budget, and I will move on.
Oh, thank you. Now you can go.
Okay, thank you. Just quickly, obviously our mission, excellent customer service, providing for safe and efficient movement of people and goods. Our areas of priority, of course, are the Vermont economy, making Vermont most affordable, protecting its vulnerable, and continuous modernization and improvement efficiencies for government. The fiscal budget for 22 is presented to you at $680,760,427, and it's a 3.7% increase over the fiscal 21 budget. We have done this with no tax or fee increases.
Could you go back onto the prior slide?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Okay. And I've obviously you've got quite a bit of moving around, and the top line is where it shows up the most, 6% increase.
Right.
In terms of the T fund between 21 and 22. And I know that some of that probably has to do with how you've dealt with revenue loss and how that's affected the T fund spending. But if you could just address that 16 million up, which is kind of a big budgetary fluctuation.
Sure. Well, a lot of that, Senator, has been because we used one-time 100% federal money in pockets of the budget that we had previously thought we would have to use state dollars, which freed up extra state dollars. We also had a fairly significant increase in revenue forecast over fiscal 21. So that really makes up the majority of that.
Okay.
And we'll explain that further on through the presentation.
Okay. We understand how we try to use those federal dollars whenever.
Right.
So,
Right.
all right.
So again, we've done this without no tax or fee increases. And as I said, state fund increases resulted from significant improvements over the forecast as we went through the pandemic. Obviously, the federal fund increases were in large part a result of the money that came to the state in December of 2021. Some of the local and other increases were some transfer of funds from FEMA, from the Department of Public Safety, for some significant rail work that we do. The TIB fund also increased as a result of the revenue forecast improvement, and Central Garage Fund increased by $600,000 because we deliberately restored money that had been shaved in the prior budget. As always, of course, there are budget pressures. $4.6 million in salaries and benefits year over year are in this budget, as well as Pay Act is fully funded, and the 27th payroll in this fiscal year is fully funded as well. And you can see here, just going back over 7 years, the chart. This is, we believe, the second largest budget in the agency history, only surpassed in one of the immediate years following Tropical Storm Irene. And this slide shows really where the funding sources come from. I would direct you really just to the primary ones. If you look at the orange in the lower left-hand corner, the single largest source of funding comes from the Federal Highway Administration. Off to the right in green, the second largest source of our funding does come from state transportation dollars. And the third largest bucket of funding is in the gray portion, other federal, and that's the conglomeration of federal transit, federal aviation, federal rail, and the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration. So these are the sources of where our money comes from in this budget. This slide shows where we spend that money. And again, I'll just look at.
So Joe, going back to that pie chart,
Yep.
in the December federal legislation, there was about 50 some odd million in highway aid in the block
Yes.
grant.
Yes.
And we budgeted some of that in the budget adjustment and moved it out then. The remainder would be reflected here in this orange chart.
Well, a portion of that, but this budget that you have before you also parks approximately $20 million in federal fiscal 23. Because as you know, many of our projects, as you know, extend across a number of budget years. So right now we're looking at, if you would, roughly 30 of that 50.4 is in this budget and 20 of that is extended on into fiscal 23.
Okay, all right. Oh, you didn't blow it all at once.
No, we're trying to be frugal and be prepared for what's coming. So the next slide shows where we spend this money. And again, I would just draw you to some of the highlights. On the right-hand side at about 3 o'clock, you'll see state paving. That is the single largest expenditure in our budget. This is a record level of paving dollars in Vermont. We'll speak to that later in the presentation. The second largest bucket is maintenance, pretty much across the wheel at about 9 o'clock at $103.5 million. And we want to draw your attention to the third single largest portion of spending, which is at about 11 o'clock, the Brown Wedge town programs, just under $80 million in this budget going directly to towns this year. You know, growing the Vermont's economy, obviously the economy relies on a transportation system that's in good order. Something that's not to be overlooked is this budget puts thousands of jobs to work in the streets. It does reflect a $14 million increase to town highway structures and class 2 programs. And I want to point out that this fully restores what was paused in the way of town aid in the fiscal 21 budget. It has $36.4 million for rail, $18.3 million total for airports. However, 7.8 of that is a pass through to the Burlington International Airport. So the state aviation budget is 10.5 million, and we'll speak further to all of these, of course, in the presentation. Another highlight I want to point out is the investment in downtown transportation funds. 4 million in transportation fund, 1.5 million proposed from the general fund, lifting this investment in local communities to $5.5 million.
Let me ask Joe, this was proposed before we knew how much money was coming through this last American Rescue Plan.
Absolutely, Senator, that's correct.
And so I raised the question about whether, in light of how much money is flowing into all our cities and towns, whether in fact something that we did prior to knowing that there actually was going to be so much money flowing directly to municipalities would change any of these recommendations. I would say that might be one, simply because out of 5 million versus I don't know 200 million. I mean, it just seems like that these are the kinds of initiatives that that federal money will allow the municipalities to many more municipalities to actually undertake than what we could have done through this one appropriation.
And that's certainly a factor. I realize I heard the governor say, I think at the press conference today, that the details on exactly, you know, how the money can be spent and how it's even being divided are still being determined. You know, clearly, when we run these programs and we fund the grants that we fund, we know what those projects are intended to do. So to your point, where a project could otherwise perhaps be funded, that's one thing. But I think for the time being, we would recommend that this remain intact, because we understand the types of projects, we know the types of projects that all of our town funding can be directed at. But again, understandably, the landscape is shifting as we speak. I agree with you. On protecting Vermont's vulnerable populations, our budget has $45.8 million in public transit, 8.8 million for Amtrak, 5.2 million for park and rides, 18 million for bicycle and pedestrian facilities. And again, we'll talk about all of these later on in more detail. An additional $5 million for electric vehicle incentives, and $6.1 million invested in the Lake Champlain and other waterway cleanup money. On the federal funding piece, as to your point, Senator Kitchell, it's changing literally by the day. But with respect to the Federal High Administration and the FAST Act, that is authorized now through September 30th. And it was supposed to have been attended to last year, but it did not get done. So we are looking at a reauthorization coming late summer, early fall. And quite frankly, we may be looking at an infrastructure bill, rolled into that as well. We don't know. There's so much up in the air at this point. Just to give you a quick overview of some of the actions of the agency during the pandemic, from the beginning for nearly a year now as we speak, we have been involved in the delivery of the personal protective equipment around Vermont on a daily basis to hospitals and medical facilities as needed. Of course, you all know we did the traffic data work early on with staffing. And then as we stopped doing that with people, we started to ramp up our ability to do that with automated devices that do not look at actual license plate origins. They simply count the vehicles, which we still do, and we report that twice weekly. The agency was involved in nearly all of the food distribution rollouts throughout the year. We assisted the National Guard for medical surge construction facilities, as well as pop-up testing facilities. We have deployed people across the agencies of state government in support. I believe today we have 96 people whose jobs are directly and primarily focused on COVID response, everything from contact tracing to working at the vaccination centers and the delivery of PPE, as I said. And we've had people at ACCD, Department of Labor, Department of Health, as have others in state government. It's an all hands on deck response. And this slide, I won't read through it, but this just shows in some more detail where some of our employees have been deployed at various points throughout the last year, including today. The budget development form, Senator Kitchell, you've seen these as we go through, so I'll just go over those. Electric Vehicle Incentive Program. This is the $5 million program I was referring to. It has $2 million directly to incentivize purchases for EVs. $1.5 million to establish the Replace My Ride program, $250,000 for educational outreach, another $250,000 for dealer incentive programs, and an additional $1 million for EV charging infrastructure. We will speak later about public transit as well, but it does continue for the electrification of the public transit fleet. And again, another budget development form that you have seen, Senator Kitchell.
Mm-hmm.
Finance and administration portion of the agency is a $16.2 million budget level. It has a slight increase of 1.5%, which just reflects basically salaries and benefits. It also does capture 4 people who have transferred from maintenance, and the reason is simply because the job that they do in logistics goes across the entire agency and no longer really just within the VTrans side of the house. So we've transferred them from maintenance to finance, and you will see a corresponding reduction on the maintenance slide. And again, the budget development form for finance and administration. The state aviation program, as I said, was $10.5 million. We own 10 state of Vermont airports. This is an increase of 9.4%. It will fund 13 projects at 7 airports across the state of Vermont. It also, I know, does have $1 million in here for a Highgate sewer water project that we are going to help share the cost of. This will allow us to hook on to a water line and sewer line that the town of Highgate is bringing up easterly on Route 78, and it will take it down Airport Road in Highgate. It'll allow us to connect our VTrans facility that's there today, and it will allow us to connect the state-owned buildings at the end of Airport Road, and frankly put us in a much better position for any future commercial development along that airport facility in Highgate. And the
Joe, before you go on aviation.
Yes, Senator Starr.
In Newport, or Coventry Airport, we're trying to get the flight school switch from the little terminal over to the building next door. is there anything in this budget for that airport?
It would be part of all of our airports, Senator Starr. I'm not familiar with an actual line item or a cost related to switching the flight school, but I'm sure we could follow up with you or and Michelle Boomhauer certainly, unless Michelle has some knowledge on that at this moment. I know we could follow up with you about that.
I'll give Michelle a call.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
And again, the budget development form for aviation. Transportation buildings, we have 59 garages statewide. This looks like it's a big percentage increase, but the reason is because we nearly wiped this out completely in the fiscal 21 budget due to revenue pressures, primarily from COVID. The funding increase really will resume the funding for the construction project of a new garage for us in Lunenburg, which has been delayed. This is up in District 7. And the rest of what we typically do in the transportation.
Oh, Senator Starr's district, make a note of that.
I'm going to give that to you, Senator Kitchell. You're closer than I am by 50 miles.
That's probably true. Oh.
No, that's good.
This line in our budget typically just does things like you see at the bottom. It helps us when we have to put in replacement or repairs to heating systems and standby generation, but we will be undertaking a construction project in Lunenburg.
Yep.
And again, the budget development form, which Senator Kitchell has seen. Program development, very large portion of our total budget at $315 million. It is a decrease, but I would point that as we go on and we talk about ups or downs, increases and decreases, that's typically driven by where projects are in their project life cycle. So again, this is, and we will speak further from here on about specific projects that are all part of the program development division. And this just shows you the comparison between fiscal 22 and fiscal 21 at the bottom of the page. We'll go through each of these areas in the following slides under program development. And again, the budget development sheet for program development. As I mentioned in the beginning, paving at $120.5 million, significant increase, nearly $15 million. It is a record for the agency. And I point out it is the 9th consecutive year of a paving budget at or above $100 million, which we have established really as a bright line below which we should just not go if at all possible. I also point your attention to that of this, 55 million will go to rehabilitation projects. And within those projects, there will be 74 miles of road which will see widened shoulders for improvement for bike and pedestrian travel. We anticipate a total of 43 construction projects and paving 360 miles. And as a comparison, last year, we paved 175 miles. This shows you how we measure productivity, measure results with what we spend on pavement. Really, I think the best way to look at this chart is if you look at the 2 shades of green versus the 2 shades of magenta or purple. And the way that the magenta or purple shrinks as you look from left to right, and conversely, the way that the green shades grow as you look from left to right. What this tells us is that from 2010 to 2020, we have reduced the amount of pavement in Vermont that is rated at poor or very poor, and increased the amount of pavement that's rated at good or fair. None of these things that we do, though, fails to appreciate that if a Vermonter lives in an area where all of their roads are very poor, that's 100% of their experience, and we get that. But this is a way that we do track how we spend the money and what the metric is that we can show change. I just do point out as well in 2020, we had an equipment failure for a certain portion of the mileage, so the data from that is still coming in. But even at this point, it's tracking at 62% is good or fair, versus 38% that's poor or very poor.
Yeah, it's only bad, Joe, when it's all in one district.
Well, no, you're right. I agree.
And of
I'm
course,
not going to mention any district.
Bobby, and every constituent feels that it's their town or their road that they travel is the worst one.
Interstate Bridge. We have 523 bridges and large culverts, because depending on the size of a culvert, it's actually classified as a bridge on the Vermont's interstate highway system. This is a very slight decrease. It does fund 21 complete projects, 15 of which will be actual construction. So when I say funding projects, but then I point out construction, a lot of project work is done before the construction actually starts, scoping, design, right-of-way acquisition. So that will be done on 21 projects, but 15 will go to construction. And in this year, we hope to complete the massive bridge project in Rockingham on I-91. And how we measure proficiency, if you will, on how we spend the money on bridges. This is the bridge deficiency scale. Deficiency, I want to point out, does not mean structure safety. Deficiency is a scoring system that looks at everything in the bridge. And we have set a target of 6% or less rated bridges being classified as deficient. And again, through the years, you can see how the line has dropped. And now we are below the 6% mark now, coming in at 2% in 2020. The state bridge program, there are 1,862 bridges on Vermont state roads, non-interstate highways. This is a decrease in budget at $49.8 million. And the reason really is it reflects the near completion of some significant projects, most notably the Middlebury Tunnel project. We always refer to it as a tunnel project, but it's also 2 surface bridges in downtown Middlebury, which is why it's in this category. And that project will be completed this year. Again, this budget will do work on 67 projects, 36 of which will be into actual construction. And state bridge deficiency rating target is 10%, and we are currently tracking at 4%. The roadway program is a $37.3 million share of our budget. It is a decrease of 11%. Again, this is primarily driven by the near completion of the significant project in downtown Waterbury. That project will be completed this year. This does fund work on 71 other projects, 26 of which will move into actual construction. A type of some of the projects you can see that this category pings would be the Burlington Champlain Parkway, some work at the Burlington Rail Yard Enterprise project, the Crescent Connector in Essex, continued work on Route 7 in Pittsford, Segment 1, finishing up the Waterbury Main Street project, some work at intersections on US 2 and Industrial Avalon and Williston, and then numerous slope culvert projects across the state of Vermont all fall into the roadway program. Traffic and safety is a slight decrease this year, related really to decreased funding needs based on projects. Again, this will have 22 projects in construction, and it will do work on a total of 40 projects. Some of the projects that will be occurring this year will be 4 pavement projects, 14 intersection projects, and 3 projects completely revamping roadside signs along the highways. I point to the $5 million investment in behavioral safety. For those of you that have been on the committee for a while, this used to be what we referred to as the Governor's Highway Safety Program. Nationally through NHTSA, it is changing its nomenclature, and it's referred to as the Behavioral Safety Unit now. So I just wanted to, this is not something new. It's the same program, and it's accounted for in this bureau actually. And some of the types of projects that occur in traffic and safety are, there's a roundabout on Route 7 in Burlington near Christ the King Church at the bottom of Ledge Road. Project like that. Of course, you know, we continue to try to get the double diverging interchange off the ground at exit 16 in Colchester. Route 4 signage projects. We're doing work in Hartford and work along 116 and then around the state, various sign marking, line striping, and centerline rumble strip projects across the state.
Can I just ask about the Burlington Roundabout?
Yes, sir.
Is that just to replace it entirely, or is it to change the design somehow?
That's an excellent question, Senator, and I will ask that we follow up with you on what the design look will be. I do know that it is going to significantly impact utilities. There's a lot of utilities that all converge right there, And I do believe it's slightly changing the pattern, but I would have to follow up with you. And I know that Chief Engineer Gamble is on the line and she can make a note of that. We've worked closely with the city on this, so.
Where
Okay,
is it?
yeah.
Where is it,
It's-
Philip?
It's right as you come in and you're traveling north on Route 7, right as you come into the city, you hit a couple of forks in the road where Union and Willard go off to the right. And at the last one of those is this roundabout. It's right over the park. I'm forgetting the name of the park there, but
Yeah, it's right at the top of Locust Street.
yeah.
So Locust runs between Shelburne Road and Pine Street.
Yeah, the reason I asked partly is that that's probably the worst roundabout of any I've ever experienced because its design is such that you can't really treat it as a roundabout
No, right.
in from a lot of different directions. So
Yeah, it's more like just a big obstacle in the middle of the road.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. So we'll follow up with you on what that's supposed to look like when that work is completed.
thank you.
Program highlights, in the highway safety care areas where we obviously track all our crash data and fatal crash data. And in 2020, we sadly finished the year at 62 fatalities versus 58 in the year before that. This is the type of data that we create. And I just do draw your attention to the green block for 2020. We continue to have a sad reality in Vermont. 57% of all fatalities involved people not wearing seatbelts. And as alarming, 47% of all drivers involved in fatal crashes were impaired, either by alcohol, by drugs, or by both. We produce this data weekly. And as of today, the data hasn't been updated. Sadly, there was a pedestrian killed last night, but prior to that, the data from this morning was we are at 7 this year versus 4 at this time last year. So that would be 8 now with that pedestrian from last night.
Is there some duplication? Because I know that sometimes you have impaired drivers with a fatality and they also were unbelted. So how do you count when they are sort of a double header, so to speak?
That's a great question. And my belief, Senator, and we can confirm this, is that we count both categories.
Oh, okay.
So if you're unbelted, you're unbelted. And if you're impaired, you're impaired. And
Okay.
one wouldn't necessarily negate the data point from the other.
Yeah, except it might be out of all fatalities when you put, when you
Right.
look at it,
Right.
it would be interesting to see out of that, then X% were actually involved multiple, both the alcohol, drug, and unbelted. I was just wondering. Okay.
Right.
It seems like it increases your likelihood of a fatality. Senator Ballant.
Yes, if we could, I'm just trying to follow along here. Is there a comparison on fatalities involving vehicles with people unbelted for the previous years? I can't find that statistic to compare.
Yes, I believe, and I'm looking at the screen. I guess I'm looking at the screen at the right, Senator Ballant, at the top, motor vehicle occupant unbelted, and you see where it goes 2020 across to 2015. So if you look by position in the vehicle, whether it's driver or passenger, you'll see that comparison.
Now I see. Thank you. I was having a hard time.
It's a busy chart. Yes. There's actually a lot of information there when you have time to delve into it a little further.
Okay.
Our park and ride facilities portion of our budget is 5.2 million, a slight decrease. And again, that just reflects the work scheduled for this year versus last year. We will be expanding the park and ride in Berlin at exit 7. We will also be expanding the park and ride at exit 5, the Williamstown Northfield exit. And we are looking to begin construction of the new park and ride facility in Williston, just off exit 12, as you go up the hill toward Heinsberg, right on the right. we have a piece of land and we will be beginning construction there. So with the work that you see here, we will be adding 228 new spaces across the state system.
Any plugins, any electrical plugins at those places, Joe?
Yes, Senator Starr, I believe there are 27 level ones that are scheduled at the park and rides. And again, level one, of course, is the one that takes longer for you to charge. But the theory is that if you park your car there for the day to go to work, that is sufficient. So these 27 across these 3 facilities would be added.
Yeah, that's good.
Bicycle and pedestrian facilities, $16.8 million portion of the budget, a very slight decrease. This will be funding 31 different projects to include things, for example, like the completion of the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail. This also realizes a significant increase in municipal sidewalk program money, which is typically $300,000 a year. That's been bumped to $1.3 million. Again, to your point earlier, Senator Kitchell, about whether or not communities could use this federal money on the horizon. You know, we're not sure, and we don't know necessarily if they would choose to use that, but this money would be earmarked specifically that they could only use it for sidewalk programs. And so we were looking at various ways that we could try to stimulate municipal construction and benefits long before, of course, we heard about this most recent bill. It also continues funding for locomotion. Some of the projects this year that are on the books in addition to the LVRT would be, there's a bike ped program in Bennington, some more work in central Vermont, some work along Route 15 in Essex, some work in Fairfield, Milton, and also some work up in Richford in the Missisquoi Rail Trail. Transportation alternatives, these are programs that closely resemble some of the programs that you might have seen in bike and ped facilities, but they're not quite exactly the same. They're more environmental. There are some bike and ped programs, but for example, we're building a salt shed with the town of Bridgewater in here as well. And that's some of the type of stuff that occurs in this portion of our budget. 21 projects will be in construction with a total of 42 projects worked on. And when we say worked on, again, those would advance. So likely of the remaining numbers, of the remaining 21 that are being worked on this year, they'll likely move to construction next year or the following year. Program development is really just a slight decrease, and it is really the administration cost of the program development program. The rest area program is $1.5 million. It's a significant percentage increase only because it's never really a lot of money. And this year, the major cause of that is we're doing a resurfacing project at the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Rest Area on 89 northbound. There's no other major construction in this program. And as you know, this program through the agency only addresses capital projects, and BGS maintains the operating budgets for Vermont welcome centers and rest areas. And we're also doing some work. I want to point out, though, again, another one in Senator Starr's area. We're doing some preliminary engineering work at the rest area in Derby as well, Senator Starr, on Interstate 91. So that work will result.
Excuse me, is anybody keeping track of all Senator Starr's money in this?
I am, Senator. We're up to about 100,000 now.
And again, this is the budget development form that Senator Kitchell has seen. The maintenance budget, you recall I mentioned this was the second largest bucket of expenditures in the agency's entire budget at $103 million. It is a $3.7 million increase. It does add $3 million for bridge maintenance. It also accounts for what we believe will be becoming a significant retirement cost. Maintenance is a group of people over 500 in total. And with that, we often have ebbs and flows and waves of retirement. We're forecasting that in this group as well. And this is also the group that I mentioned earlier where 4 people transferred into finance and administration. This reflects them transferring out of maintenance. And I don't want to tempt fate, but I thought while we were speaking of maintenance, I would just share with you where we are as of this week with respect to material use for winter of 2021. And as a comparison for salt, year to date, and I know Ann Gamble's cringing that I say this because that'll probably bring on the worst next 6 weeks of winter, but we're at 99,000 tons of salt. This time last year, we were at 131,000 tons, and 2 years ago at this time, we were 186,000 tons. So you can see at about $86 a ton, that has the potential for very positively affecting our budget in this year. And again, this is the budget development form, already reviewed by Senator Kitchell. Policy and planning, Michelle's shop, a very slight decrease, primarily just because in the prior budget, there was a one-time grant to the Chittenden County Metropolitan Planning Office, and that's not reflected ongoing. And the budget development form for P-PAID, the rail program. In Vermont, there are 592 miles of active rail, and the state owns 298 of those. This is an increase of nearly $5 million. Predominantly because of a discretionary grant from the Federal Railroad Administration. This does fund the continuation of Amtrak. It also recognizes the increase that will be realized in this budget when Amtrak comes into Burlington, which we hope will be either in December of this current year or perhaps January of 22, but in either way, about 6 months worth of the cost of extension to Burlington are reflected in this budget. It also realizes continued work along the Western Corridor. Again, Middlebury Tunnel is part of that, but it is quickly coming all together. And it also recognizes a significant amount of work that is being done between Rutland, south to Bennington, and then west.
I was going to say, Senator Sears, isn't Hoosick in New York across from you, huh?
This is altogether, this was a $31 million project, 20 million of which was granted through the FRA. And of course, rail program ridership isn't really a chart that has much relevance, saying we've had it closed for a year. But the point is that Amtrak was holding steady until we suspended service. So we are, I believe, close to restoring service as we look to, the very near future with respect to the current status of the virus, and we'll be announcing when the time comes what that will be. And obviously, there's a pent-up demand, so we expect that this will, recover. I believe
Senator Sears has his hand up. Senator Sears.
Thank you. I'm just curious about the bus between Bennington and Albany. Will that be resumed or?
Senator, yes.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
We would expect to resume intercity transit service or announce the restoration of that when we announce the restoration of Amtrak. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
And again, the budget development form for rail. And speaking of public transit, $42.8 million budget. That's a 4.6% increase. It does include a direct pass-through grant to Green Mountain Transit, which is a designated urban area, federally designated urban area. It is the increase in our budget is directed predominantly for capital improvements, which is buses. 16.5 million of this will go for bus replacement, and of that, 3.8 million will be for up to 7 electric buses. But a total of 95 buses across the providers in Vermont will be funded in this budget this year. And the last bullet, you will see that 26.7 million. Again, that was part of the relief program that was passed in December of 2020, and it went directly to transit providers, enabling them to offset operating costs, which was different than the first round of money that was received last spring, which was, I believe, it was around 13 million, and I could be off a bit, but that was sent to them directly, primarily for safety materials, PPE, and whatever they had to do to make it safer for their employees and for the public. And again, ridership on buses this year really sort of suffered the same reality as Amtrak. But the point really here is that ridership was on the upswing prior to the pandemic hitting. And, you know, it's going to recover, but like a lot, it'll take time.
I wonder to what extent the fact that so many people now have been working from home and most of state government, we're going to see any influence in terms of if you people not even needing public transit because they were using it to get to jobs. But it could be interesting to see. There are a whole lot of unknowns in terms of working from home, working remotely, and the impact it's going to have on rental property to, I suppose, transportation issues.
Yep, all very good points, Senator. You know, it will be interesting to see what the traction is on recovery.
You won't even have to use that new bridge there and whatever in South Hero.
Well, we can't leave it the way it is, so we've got to do something. We've got to try to
No,
finish.
I know that. I know that's quite an investment right there.
It is. It's about $65 million, and I just got word today that that project will probably be running around the clock, or at least with a night shift in addition to a day shift. There was a little bit of a delay 2 summers ago when we discovered PCBs on the floor of Lake Champlain, and which of course we reported, and we had to mitigate that. So that pushed this back some, but there should be some significant completions achieved this year. And again, the budget development form seen by Senator Kitchell. Our central garage budget is $22.2 million this year. It is a slight increase. It does restore money that was cut in fiscal 21. And we are anticipating an equipment purchase plan of $8.1 million this year. And the budget development form for central garage. The Department of Motor Vehicles, certainly any questions, you've got the Commissioner and Terry, her Finance Director here, but the budget is $36 million. It is a slight increase. As you know, DMV is where we make our money in state funds. It anticipates collecting over $341 million in taxes and fees. Some of the increases are reflective of increased cost of mail processing and also bank service charges. A couple of years ago, we eliminated charging a consumer for using a credit card at the counter. And obviously, we still get charged by the credit card companies. And the bullet point for IT, I just want to point out, is completely separate and aside from the conversation currently regarding the IT investment fund, of which EDS, I believe, has $15 million earmarked for the DMV core system. So this $500,000 is just additional IT smaller projects there. For example, trying to improve forms that are easier and can be electronically populated, and also then do the calculation so you can determine what your tax is, and just try to eliminate some human error when Vermonters are filling out forms. That's the sort of thing that we're looking for that $500,000 bucket to capture.
Senator Starr, did you have your hand up?
Well, I was going to ask the Secretary about the new IT system, but this is just a upgrade forms and things like that when I saw the 500,000, but
that wouldn't buy you a whole new replacement.
No,
sure.
A few iPads maybe.
Yeah.
Right. And again, the budget development form for DMV reviewed by Senator Kitchell. Town Highway Bridge. There are 1,652 bridges across the town highway system. This is an increase of $1.8 million. And again, much like our other programs, it is driven by where projects are in their state of readiness. One of the major projects that will begin, it's got a lot of moving parts still, but we will be joining New Hampshire in constructing an entirely new structure across the Connecticut River, just south of the existing structure in Brattleboro. And that project.
Oh, Senator Ballant, right there, huh?
There's been a lot.
We've been watching it closely. My son has a thing for bridges. He asks me about that every time we go over it.
Yeah.
Right.
Happy to get the update.
We'll be sure to keep you posted, Senator Ballant.
What about my covered bridge up here in Troy, Joe? I don't see that on there.
Well, Senator Starr, right after the fire, we contacted the town. In fact, I believe that day, that was a Saturday, I think that occurred. And the districts actually went up immediately. And first of all, the districts removed the bridge from the river.
Yeah.
And I'm under the impression we offered a temporary bridge to the town. But at that point, and that's what, a month or so ago, the town wasn't quite sure just yet which way it wanted to go. So, with respect to replacing the bridge, there's a lot that has to occur before they would be ready to propose a project. But as I think I mean, we're very dialed in at the local garage level with all the towns, and we'll continue to offer whatever support we can. But we were right there on the spot to help the town in the wake of the fire.
No, your guys have been great. They've just started drawing new timbers down there in lumber to get ready to start building the new bridge when you guys are ready. So
Okay.
I thought I would alert you.
Okay. All right.
I'm just kidding.
Well, I think we heard in transportation kind of the saga of what happened there, where because it was considered a vehicle, it couldn't be moved, and ultimately the bridge went up, and maybe the owner of the snowmobile, the insurance is going to be involved.
10 grand, Jane.
What?
He had the minimum amount of 10,000.
Oh, well, that won't buy many timbers, that's for sure.
By
So-
one pickup load. But
Yeah.
no, I think, Mr. Secretary, they're going to be calling you in regards to a temp bridge to put in there until they get everything worked out. So,
Okay, Senator Starr, thanks for the heads up.
Yeah.
And I believe we've said we could do that, but obviously we'll follow up, and I know that Ann is hearing this as well, so.
yeah,
Okay.
your guys from Derby and around were great help.
So I'm going to keep going. I don't know how many more slides.
Very few, Senator. Yep.
Okay.
And then again, this is just the way we measure town bridges regarding deficiency. The target is 12%. We're tracking 2% currently in 2020. And the budget development form for town bridges. And town highway programs, again, you recall at the start of the presentation, I mentioned that the third largest single group of investments in our budget were directed to towns. And that is $79.2 million this year. It is a nearly $22 million increase from last year. And some of the highlights here really are that we have, we've increased $20 million for town highway. And we've also added $14 million for town highway structures and class 2 roadway. You recall last year, we suspended both of those programs just because we needed to. And we've fully restored those programs. And also, no one who was in the queue last year will be disadvantaged this year, because typically the way those programs work, if you get money this year, you move to the back of the line and it's several years before you come up again. But those towns that were there last year would not be penalized, and towns in the queue this year will be recognized. And so I just want to point that out. And this page sums up the total extent of town programs. I won't read all these, but you can see, I believe it is a very, very solid investment in Vermont towns as part of our transportation budget right across the board. And the transportation board is the last area that we have a budget item for. It doesn't report to us, but we pay for it. And it is a very slight increase, which really reflect operating costs. And that is the budget development form for the transportation board, which leads me to the end of the prepared presentation.
That looks good.
Of course, your transportation committees have taken detailed testimony on it. So in the end, whether there are any adjustments, this would be the plan. I think sometimes, and if anybody's listening, and of course they are, the plan that outlines the project and the proposed level of spending and projects is the plan, but the actual money to make and to actually have any of it happen is done through the budget process. So in past years, we have a lot of people that would say they want to support the transportation bill, but if they don't vote for the budget, then they basically are are not voting to provide the funding for what they voted that they want to do. So I think it's important that people don't get confused that what we do with the transportation fund is really to go down, look at the projects in greater detail, and then ultimately it's the budget that puts the money with the plan as it is approved by the policy committees. So Senator Sears, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I have some questions about DMV and when we might expect more or less I'm going to call it full service. I've had several people approach me about various things. I know they can do them online, but not everybody's as good at online as people like Bobby Starr. So some have difficulties. And I also, one of the areas is the ID that one needs in order to be able to get on a airplane these days. And I think right now people aren't traveling that much unless you're in some states, I guess, but not in Vermont. When do we expect some full service back in the DMV?
So good afternoon, members of the committee. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So first of all of our branch offices are open, all of our permanent locations. The part-time locations we have not opened up. They are fully functioning. We have a scheduling system in place. You can call and schedule an appointment. You can go online and schedule that appointment. But for people who don't want to come into our branch offices, we expanded services for online. So we are open. We have been open and operating since last fall. The scheduling appointment system is working phenomenal. You schedule your appointment at your location at the time that you need. Our wait times are approximately 10 minutes. The only thing that influences that with your appointment is if we have call out of staff, but we're not seeing more than a 30-minute wait if we are impacted by staff being out. We have gotten positive feedback. Doing business with DMV in this manner has been extremely positive.
It sounds like Senator Sears, though, has got a problem from a constituent.
No, I've had constituent issues, and I'm not sure they're familiar with how to even schedule an appointment. And I don't, it's been things like my registration's been held up. How do I get this, new picture ID for my license so I can get, is it the real ID they need now?
So Senator, just I want to say the Bennington office was closed for a period of time after we opened up because of COVID. But we are opening, we are opened and we are operating out of there. We're more than happy to help them get an appointment or get their service. Real ID, Real ID is supposed to be, every state is supposed to be in compliance with Real ID by October of 2021.
Right.
And you need a Real ID in order for TSA to allow you to travel. Vermont is at 92% compliance with Real ID, which is the star. If you all pull out your license and take a look at it, is the star that is on your license. So if you choose not to get a Real ID and you choose to have a driver privilege card, then you would need a passport in order to travel.
Yeah, but if people want to upgrade to the Real ID.
So you can make an appointment.
Make an appointment at the local office.
And upgrading to Real ID is a very simple process. And if you have specific constituents that I can support or guide through the process, please just reach out to me and we will do that. If you are driver privilege and you want to go to Real ID, you do have to come into the office because you're presenting your residency documents and that you're a US citizen. And that's the difference. But our numbers are good. And I just want to say that. Also, a lot of Vermonters don't understand if they have an enhanced driver's license, which has the flag up in the corner so you can travel across borders, then you're already real ID. So because it goes driver privilege, real ID, and then enhanced driver's license. So I think there's a little bit of confusion with that, but more than happy to help. It's fairly easy to get an appointment to come in and upgrade your license.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions of Senator Ballin?
This is not a question for the commissioner. This is just a very public thanks. Early on in the pandemic, I had a constituent with a very thorny issue related to the sale of a car, and Commissioner Manoli went down and actually looked through the DMV main office building to try to find the documentation for my constituent. So I haven't seen you in months, obviously because of COVID. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thanks are always in order. Other comments or questions? Obviously, we give great deference to the work of the transportation committees to really scrub these numbers. Other questions? If not, Friday afternoon, I think we could probably, you'd like to go back to your desk, except you aren't at your desk. Other comments or not?
No.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Committee, we were doing S16 next, and I saw Cheryl Hooker was on but left. Chrissy, do you know she had to leave or?
I just zipped her and Jim a note that you guys are ready to move on to S16. So we're hoping she'll pop right back in.
Okay, is that, and Dick, that was one of your bills, right? It's on school discipline. Senator Sears.
Senator Rahm and I introduced the bill.
I thought you had an association with the bill. Okay.
Yep. Yep.
And you want to create a council?
Yes. I got to tell you, well, Senator Hooker's here.
Yeah, Senator Hooker is connecting now, so. We, planning rooms, huh? When my son was in second grade, that actually they had a big box. I don't know, it was probably like an appliance might have come in. And so they didn't have planning, but I think my son might have spent quite a bit of time there in that cardboard box in second grade.
Man, I would have loved that.
That's clever.
I don't think he ever objected. I want you to know that yes, it's very hard to imagine listening to him on VPR, which I've not done, to know what a screw off. I guess this is on. I guess I'm putting myself on the record, but academically, shall we say, his K through 12 experience was not stellar.
Jane, I just want to say, I've heard you say now 3 times that you haven't listened to your son. I do not believe you. I think you clicked in and listened.
No, I have not. I have not clicked it. I don't even know how to do it. And so
He's on Zoom too much to do that.
I feel like I've been in front of a screen. So I don't know, but I do know, I think Senator Ballin was talking about planning rooms. And so it reminded me that we had a lesser cost version of that, which was.
We had some boxes at my house too. So.
Oh, did you? Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So I think that was not such a bad punishment.
No.
All right. So Senator Hooker, we're sorry we pulled you out and then you left.
That was a little bit of school discipline, right?
There you go.
I think so. So we are on S16 and it's around a school discipline advisory council. And
Correct.
we have Senator Hooker here to give us an update. Obviously, because it has a council, the council gets compensated, and that's why we have the bill.
Yes, well, thank you, Chair
Yeah.
Kitchell. Cheryl Hooker for the Senate Education Committee. I'll be reporting the bill on the floor. I think this bill, as you've said, proposes to create a school disciplinary advisory council to assess school discipline methods in Vermont's public schools. There will be 15 members on the board, which will begin meeting on September 1st, 2021, and the council will meet for no more than 6 meetings. Members of the council shall be entitled to a per diem compensation, which is $50 per day. And JFO standard method of calculating expenses is $76.25 per diem for public members.
Unless they're
Therefore-
otherwise compensated by their job.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Therefore, the total compensation for public members and expenses is $126.25 per day. All 15 members attend all 6 meetings. That means it'd be about $11,500.
Is this an ongoing advisory council, or is
No,
it for
no.
a period of time?
They will report to the General Assembly. There are only 6 meetings. Oh, just a minute, wait a minute. I believe, I'd have to check on that and see what we ended up doing, because there was some talk about making it an ongoing council so that we would keep track of what was going on in the schools as far as discipline. The purpose of the council is to gather data, to work with AOE and the school districts to get accurate data on the types of discipline that is happening in our schools. Currently, the information for Vermont's disciplinary actions is incomplete, and we would like to have a more accurate and more precise indication of what's happening and who's being affected by this. So I do have to check to see.
What we're talking about here then is the reimbursement. I had a question. Are the membership, is it to develop sort of best practices in terms of how discipline is defined, or to guide practices within schools? Because I know that the reason behind the bill obviously is to not to escalate, and to really know how to manage some of these situations in a way that kids can stay in school and succeed in school. So
Yeah.
is the composition to get that kind of expertise on the council? I'm just wondering. I realize that isn't money, but in terms of the thinking of the bill.
Yes, exactly. That's one of the charges of the council.
Okay. Senator Baruth?
Senator Hooker, I'm just wondering, I remember this discussion over the years. AOE has been unsuccessful getting this disciplinary data, so they can't necessarily do apples to apples. And I'm wondering, how would this task force or council have greater authority to get that than AOE? It seems like a district, I could imagine, being less likely to give it to an advisory panel than they would be to give it to AOE. Is there some accompanying language that gives them more authority, or what was the discussion on that?
I'm going to ask Jim Demaray to talk about the authority piece and where the authority lies here. It's, my understanding is that the council would work with school districts and the Agency of Education, utilizing some of the data that the agency already has, but then asking for more data from school districts. Am I correct in that, Jim?
Well, the data comes from the Agency of Education. That's in section 4. So the agency is supplying the data to the task force, which is going to analyze that data and then make recommendations on how to improve the data collection process.
But it doesn't
So that's-
address the underlying, they can only give the data they have. So I think Senator Brew's concern is the sort of the paucity of and comprehensiveness or the consistency of the data that is provided to work with. I just want to understand the question that you were raising.
Right. So in other words, well, the last part maybe speaks to it, where we're asking them in part to develop different ideas to make the data more comprehensive, because, you know, the question has always been, should we have a stick to enforce compliance? So, for instance, Senator Sears remembers this for sure. Last session in 219, we had a piece that said, if you didn't provide your traffic stop data, then you couldn't get state grants for your law enforcement agency. And the thinking was that was the teeth that would allow it. And it seems like in this case.
But that was the law. That was the law, right? In that case.
No, we added that piece that you couldn't get the grant without.
No, I understand, but we were saying you aren't going to get it because you're failing to comply with the law.
Right.
Which is might be different than.
Well, I believe AOE has the authority to compel this data. Am I right in that, Jim?
They do, to the extent that it doesn't violate privacy laws. Yeah.
Right. So if they don't, if they aggregate the data, then there shouldn't be a problem, except in a super tiny school, maybe. Mm-hmm. Anyways, I'm fine with this, and we'll vote for it. I was just curious if there was some plan to get around that basic problem, which is that many districts won't or don't report.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think too that what Jim said, what Mr. Demery said about the collection of data and the process that's used is going to help to ameliorate that and help to bring that more into focus. So.
Will the report, I'm trying to read through the bill again, as passed by Senate Education. Will the report provide demographic data in terms of race, socioeconomic, other factors that
and gender,
have shown, and gender, and that studies have shown? There's a site here. Students who are suspended are at significantly higher risk of academic failure, of dropping out of school, entering the juvenile justice system. Nationally, students of certain racial and ethnic groups and students with disabilities display higher rates. Will we have data on that so that we can look?
There is an amendment to the bill that would ask for that, for the data to be disaggregated.
That really was that's the goal of it. I mean, that's one of the important things. If we don't have that data, just yesterday or this morning, there's an article in the Bennington Banner about a school, the high school or middle school, I'm not sure which, role playing with using stuff from 2006 that had people role playing as either a immigrant or an ICE agent, and it was seen as one of the persons of color who was in the class was the immigrant and felt discriminated against. And so a lot of those things that are happening even today. So I'm curious about getting that information. What led me to introduce the bill once, is basically those studies from Texas that showed a high correlation between going to jail and school discipline, even as young as the elementary grades,
So
including expulsion and suspension.
the reason that we didn't take action on the bill until today was to allow for an amendment. And I just want to connect maybe this discussion with the amendment that may address this question about what data or information being collected. So I don't know, did the amendment, is that going to be offered, Cheryl, or?
Yes, it is. And the information, the data would be disaggregated according to race, gender, needs, special needs, all of the things that are already collected in some cases. The problem, and I think what really spurred this, and I'll ask Senator Sears to corroborate this, is that we don't have accurate or complete information about this in Vermont, and we'd like to know. I mean, we can anecdotally say that Vermont is like the rest of the country. There are expulsions, and a lot of the kids who are expelled are kids who are in these different groups. So we need to be a little more accurate about that. Also, the bill has a section that would ban expulsion or exclusionary discipline for kids 8 and under.
Oh, no planning room?
Interestingly, one of the statistics that came out was that preschool kids are more likely to be excluded than other kids. And I suppose they cry or have temper tantrums or something that may be annoying, but it just shocked me to read that statistic.
No, until you can admit you have a problem, it's hard to solve that problem. And I think Vermont hasn't looked at what is the scope of the problem of suspension and expulsion. I can tell you the kids that I used to deal with really preferred expulsion and suspension. Suspension, because there was nobody at home, and they could pretty much do what they wanted.
Well, we did hear the story of the kids who knew that in a day when they weren't supposed to have cigarettes in school, and they would purposefully bring cigarettes to school just before hunting season so that they could be expelled for the 2 weeks of hunting season, or 3 weeks, or whatever it was. And that's another thing that was found out in the research, that a lot of the exclusionary discipline was due to minor infractions. I mean, taking cigarettes to school or whatever. So these are things that we want the council to look at and to come up with best practices for.
Other questions of Senator Hooker?
I moved the bill.
Okay.
Is it 15,000 or 11,500?
11,500, I think, is the approximate.
The bill had 15,000 in it, but I
15.
just saw.
I'll second that.
Is it 15, Jim?
15, yeah.
Okay. I thought the JFO.
Well, it may be,
No,
but
it's at 11,500.
the bill says 15 right now. So.
I bid 20.
So we have a motion made by Senator Sears to move the bill favorably. It carries an appropriation of 15,000 to support the work of the council, seconded by Senator Westman. Other discussion? If not, the clerk shall call the roll.
Oh, you have to give me more of a heads up than that.
Well, we work fast here, Phil.
Yeah, Westman used to be able to do this immediately.
I can only aspire.
And I had to hand do the sheets.
I can only aspire to one day be as good as Richie. Okay, 1 second. Talk amongst yourselves.
Well, it is Friday afternoon. I've got a long trip ahead of me to Bennington,
We actually are going a little later. We used to give you quite a bit of deference, particularly on a snowy winter day.
Right.
Okay, ready. Senator Ballin,
Yes.
Senator Baruth, yes. Senator Nitka.
I think she had to leave
Okay.
to go get her flu shot, maybe.
Senator Sears. Senator Sears.
Yes.
Senator Starr.
You're muted.
Yes.
Okay. Senator Westman.
Yes.
Senator Kitchell.
Yes.
Bobby, we can't go unless you say it out loud because someone could be holding a gun on you too.
Oh, golly.
So
Well,
601, and the
Yes.
reporter of the bill. I know we went through this before. Senator Ballin, do you want to delegate your reporting to another member of the committee?
No, I'll do this one. It's fine.
Okay, all right. I know it's an area that's close to your heart.
Particular interest.
Yeah. All right. So Senator Ballin then will be the reporter.
Thank you very-
And according to my calendar, my schedule, we are finished for the week once we voted on S16. So Cheryl, I hope you have to go back to committee, or are you done?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh.
Going down to the committee.
Oh.
But thank you very much. And this will be on the floor it'll be on the
Wednesday.
calendar on Tuesday, the floor on
Wednesday, probably.
Wednesday. Okay. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. So thank you, Jim. So
Good to
we
see you,
are
Jim.
adjourning the